Hi everyone. Okay, in this video I'm going to kind of break down the how to shoot and the shooting components into a couple of videos. The first video I'm going to talk about what to pack when you're shooting and also the photo shooting modes. I think it's important to understand that because if you don't shoot the image in the right setting, it'll be hard to polish and get the final results that you see here of this castle. So I want to make sure that I spend some time on that. And then how to frame is going to be an interesting one because I have some behind the scenes video that I can share with you so you have a deeper understanding and kind of get the full experience behind the scenes in terms of how I arrive to this castle and so on and so forth. So let's go one by one. So let's go ahead and talk about what to pack. This one is a pretty simple one, but I thought I'd reinforce the idea that when it comes to what to pack, ideally have something in mind that says pack 2 of everything where possible. So in my drone bag, outside of a drone, I kind of have 2 of everything. So I have 2 ND filters, I have 3 batteries, I have 2 sets of propellers. So if there was a minor drone crash and all 4 propellers had some sort of a chip, because even if a small chip is in the propellers, then it imbalances it, that causes vibrations, then I can go ahead and just whip out the new propellers and on I go. I have a few memory cards. I have a couple of microfiber cleaning cloths to make sure that I clean the lens. A pro tip: every time you do a flight, just make sure you wipe your lens clean because any noise and dust on the lens impacts the final result. So you want to make sure that those are nice and clean. And outside of that, I have cables to charge my drone. I have cables that I can plug directly into the car and one that I can plug directly into the wall. And outside of that, that's pretty much it. And obviously just make sure that everything is fully charged when you arrive at the scene, and you kind of vet through a quick checklist before you leave your house to make sure that your drone is perfectly functioning and so on and so forth. So that's that, which is a pretty simple one. What I want to spend some time on with respect to shooting is helping you understand the photo shooting mode. So what I've done is I've taken a couple of screenshots from the DJI Phantom app. That's the app that I use for my drone when I'm flying. If you use something different, then that's okay. Keep in mind that I am going to be talking to you about some of the components that are important. So when it comes to like shooting on the grid lines and stuff like that, these things, if you don't have a DJI Phantom drone or if you don't use this app, these components are applicable with any drone that you fly because it's more about the photography tips. I just use this app, which is what every single DJI a drone pilot uses, so it'll just be good to understand as a reference point. So let's go ahead and get started. The first one that I'd like to start off with is going to be this one. So when it comes to photo shooting modes, I like to shoot everything in RAW. That's a setting that is within the photo mode. So if you don't know, just a quick 101. Most cameras, they're set up to output photos in a compressed JPEG format, which obviously is good, and it's one that I encourage that you use because it saves a lot on memory and the quality is pretty good. But if you want to do deep photo editing, if you want to reduce the exposure, really lift out some of those colors, like the shadows and the highlights, and bring out some of the tones, then you want to shoot in a raw image because it stores all of that. A JPEG image compresses all of that information and assumes that you don't need to tap into all those color profiles, and as a result you're not going to be able to do the deep level of photo editing that you can with a raw image. So if you know that this is a really good subject that you're filming, like this castle for me was a pretty big deal. When I was in the area, I knew that I'm going to film this in RAW so that I can properly post-process it. Now, in terms of the photo shooting mode, DJI Phantom gives you a few different options, and I think other drone manufacturers should also give you similar options. One is you just do a single shot, which is you press it once, it takes a photo. The other one is HDR shot. I don't ever use this mode because I like to produce my own HDR images, and I'll tell you how to do good quality HDR images. But if you don't know how to do those, then you can rely on this mode. What I've realized with Phantom app or DJI app is that they take a long time. They take about 10 to 12 seconds to capture an image, process it, and then store it. So it's kind of annoying. So I don't really use the DJI shot option, or sorry, the HDR shot option. So that's that. Multiple images is something I use sometimes, depending on kind of the situation that presents itself. If I just wanted multiple copies of the same frame, I would use it. If I know that the shutter speed is quite low, and if it's a low shutter speed, then I will try to take multiple images, because a low shutter speed means that you're not going to really have a sharp image. So that means if you have multiple images, maybe one of them will be clear, just in case, a few of them are blurry. So you can choose the multiple mode, but again, I don't really use it that much. The AEB option is the one that I use the most. And so for me, I use single shot the most, and I use advanced auto bracket the most. And I'm going to go ahead and explain what that is. So if you want to achieve HDR images, then you want advanced auto bracket mode. And what that does is that you see the options of 3 and 5, and I think in some of the more latest firmware upgrades, especially with the Phantom 4 Pro, I think you can go up to 7, I believe, because this is a previous version that I took the screenshot from. With this here, if you were to say, let's say, take 3 images, then advanced auto bracket would take 3 images very quickly, and it would have different exposure values. So the first image would be just normal image, and then the second image, let's say, would be a darker image, so it'd be like minus 1.0 exposure. So then all the darker parts of the image are well captured, and then the final third image would be overexposed. So then you get all the shadows, properly lit up. So then when you slap all of these images together, when you're processing an HDR image, all the information comes together properly, which is the darks come out really nice, and all the information in the dark area of an image comes out really nice because it was overexposed. And then all the image on the foreground, when it's underexposed, a lot of the darker areas also come out quite nice. HDR image is kind of a topic of its own, but it's good to capture images in AEB mode if you're going to process them in an HDR fashion. So that's just something to know. And if you're not, then just take a single shot in a raw image, and that'll do the job. Time shot. This is pretty interesting. Sometimes I do shoot in time shots, and I think you have intervals of like 1 second, 2 seconds, 5, 10, 15, 20, and that way I don't have to press the shoot button every single time. I just know that my drone is just, shooting every 2 to 3 seconds. So that's why I kind of like the timed option sometimes. So depending on my style, I may choose it, but generally I always choose raw, and I always choose single shot. And I keep an eye out on this information in terms of what my ISO is at, what my shutter speed is at. Generally, I leave it auto, so DJI decides it. One tip, if you have a Phantom 4 Pro or a Phantom 4, that anything above ISO 1500 or 1600, I notice that images have a lot of noise to them, so I generally try to shoot at ISO 500, 600. Generally in the auto mode, all of this is decided, but keep an eye on it. If you notice that ISO is at 1600, then just to know that there's going to be a lot of pixelation and just graininess. And if you're okay with it, then that's fine. Sometimes I'm just a little picky, so that's just a tip on that end. So that's about it when it comes to knowing the basics. As far as going here, I think I keep everything to be standard. There's nothing that's different. So there's nothing for me to add here. I think the mode that we were in was in the deeper dive that we took was in the photo section. So there's nothing to talk about here. This is important. This toggle is very important. I like to keep this on. And the reason for that is because anytime I have an overexposed frame, I would want to know right away, because overexposed is not good when you're editing photos, because overexposed essentially means that there's no information in that part of the image, and there's nothing you can do to fill in that information outside of intense photo editing. and you don't want to spend too much time there. So this is a good indicator. So please have this toggle on, and then DJI will indicate to you when you're flying that, hey, this white area in the sky has no color information. And that way you can try to reduce the exposure level of, with the camera setting, or play around with settings, in the photo mode to go ahead and reduce the amount of light that is coming into your lens, so that information is not exposed. So try to make sure that you have, little overexposure and not a lot. So that would be a tip there. And the last tip that I would have, as part of the photography basics course is, ensure that your grid lines are on. And I like to shoot on the grid lines, and just watch a couple of YouTube videos. There's some really good photographers that talk about how to shoot on the grid lines, and it really gives you a very well balanced image. And if you look here, I was shooting on the bottom grid line, because if you look at the three grid lines here, right, you have 1, 2, 1, 2. So these grid lines help you put things into perspective. So I was shooting on the bottom grid line, where I put the castle on the bottom, and that way I was able to get the mountains to be on the top of the grid line, and it kind of just balanced the photo quite well. So take a bit of a deeper dive into how to shoot on the grid lines on YouTube. There's just some free courses there. If you find that this is something that you want to explore further, drop me a note, and if I have enough requests, maybe I'll also make some videos on how to shoot on the grid lines when it comes to a drone. Outside of that, I think everything else is quite simple. I think it's important to get good familiarity with ISO, shutter speed, and so on and so forth. If you don't know what any of those means, there's some courses, there's some photography courses on YouTube, or just some photography introduction on just general shutter speed, what that means, ISO, how to play with it. But DJI does a pretty good job with the auto mode. So if you don't know about it too much, as part of the basics program of this course, leave it on the auto setting, and you can trust DJI. They give you pretty good results. So that's it for now in terms of the drone photography basics, in terms of the photo mode. In the next video, I will talk about how I positioned the drone, and I'll show you some behind the scenes footage. I hope you found this to be helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.